Hi everyone, welcome to our bi-weekly Hangout on Air series. Today we are talking about Google Tag Assistant recordings. Is it working? How can you use real-time testing to improve your GA implementation? So I'm Krista Seiden, Analytics Advocate with Google, and today I'm joined by Ajay Nainani, who's a Product Manager for Google Analytics, and also Frank Kiewit, who is an Engineering Lead for Google Analytics, and he's joining remotely on our Hangout on Air. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate you being here. So before we start, as always, a couple of reminders. Submit your questions. So if you have any questions throughout the Hangout on Air, definitely put them in the chat box or use our form. We'd love to answer them. We're going to have some time at the end to take your questions. And then also, let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda. So first, we're going to give an introduction. What is Google Tag Assistant Recordings? And then Ajay's going to take us through a demo and really get into the meat of this product and show us how it's used and what that data is that we can take away and make actionable. And then finally, we'll end with your questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ajay, and he's going to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Krista. So the whole point of what we're going to show today is really revolves around one problem that you may have. It's basically whether your data is accurate. It's a big question, right? If your data is not accurate, you may be producing insights or recommendations that are totally off. You may be missing something really big. And it's actually has a pretty wide impact. In fact, we found that there was a study done by Global Research that found that on average, 12% of revenue is lost by a company due to bad data. So it's not just a theoretical problem, it affects your bottom line. So it's a problem that has a big impact. And it's also something that's not talked about very much. I think people get really excited about jumping into the analysis and the insights and the things you can do with the data, the cool charts and stuff you produce. But this question of how do you know the thing's right? It's kind of a hairy question people don't like digging into. And part of it's because it's hard. Let me share an example. Now, this is a picture from real data for Google Analytics, one of the Google Analytics reports. And I will say that there's something glaringly wrong about this data. If you guys can all take a second to look at this and see if you see what's wrong about this data.
Interesting. I mean, there's pretty high bounce rate on a couple pages, a lot of new sessions, a lot of direct. I don't know. Is this a trick question?
It is a trick question. And so, but if you think about what you were doing there, what's really important is that when you say things are really high, really low, you're judging the numbers you see based on some internal benchmark, some set of expectations.
True.
And the reality is that if you're trying to diagnose whether data is accurate, you need two things. You need the data, and you need a set of expectations from which to measure that data, right? Like the only time when something like this, let's go back and take a look at it again, the only time to tell us really obviously when something's broken is if you see big zeros, right? If I saw zero traffic from sessions from direct, or a 0 bounce rate, or 100% bounce rate, those extreme edge cases, you're like, hey, I really don't believe that any website or any app was going to perform like that.
Right.
But anything that's not a 0 or not an extreme case, it's very hard to tell by just looking at the data. So this is one of the great challenges with just looking at your data to try to diagnose whether it's accurate or not. It's not enough. You have to have a set of expectations to measure it against. So in this case, what actually happened for this website, this is a real website. This is actually the Google merchandise store where we sell like hats and shirts and stuff like that. And what happened was we launched a new website, a new landing page for that website that didn't have a Google Analytics tag. The impact of that was that anytime you came from a Google search, for example, and got to that landing page, and then went somewhere else in the site, it was seen as a direct source, a direct channel, rather than an organic search channel. So all of this direct traffic that you're looking at here, it's significantly skewed. A lot of those revenue numbers, those transaction numbers that looked like they came from direct, actually came from organic search. So if I was basing, how I think about SEO off of this data, I'd be totally off because I wouldn't think it's as important as it is.
Right.
SEO actually would be the biggest driver of revenue and transactions to the site. So it's actually a really big problem, even from our case, and it was completely invisible until we figured that out.
Right.
Now, there are many different ways things could go wrong behind the scenes. And this is not just a Google Analytics problem. This is general like an analytics tag tracking problem. It's everywhere, no matter what you use. You may have pages that you didn't tag. You may have hits that are sent late on the page based on where you put the JavaScript code or other places. You may have double hits. You may have configured things wrong, like bad filters and bad goals. So given all these problems, like how do you know when your data is actually accurate? Let's go back to that question, right? How do you know?
Right.
It's a big, difficult challenge.
It is a difficult challenge. So I spent many years as a practitioner, and one of the many things that I did was implement sites and also try to figure out what was going wrong when my data looked weird.
Right.
Maybe we did have a lot of really crazy spikes or zeros in our data sets. And it was hard without some kind of a tool to really kind of record what was going on there. I remember using the old version of Tag Assistant and the GA debugger and kind of like just a bunch of different things to try to get to the answer about what really was going on. Were we getting double hits? A lot of cases we were, and all of these different things.
Yeah, there's people have tried lots of things. Some people do real time, where they'll basically do something on their website and then just kind of quickly switch over to real time analytics and see if like the things they're doing are reflected there, which is like a nice, interesting hack for trying to solve it through real time, but it doesn't always work.
I totally did that too.
Yeah.
One thing, if you're going to use real time though, to do it, I suggest is using campaign parameters of always equaling test or something, so that you'll know in your data set when it is you sending test hits. So UTM_campaign equals test, and so on.
But I think what you'll see today is that you'll never want to do that again.
Perfect.
Right? So let's see if that's true. So we tried to help you with this problem, with the whole data expectations diagnosing problem, with something we called diagnostics, which show up in that little bell notification on the top right of Google Analytics. And what that does is we're actually building a set of expectations for your data for you. And by crawling your website, we're saying, okay, look, we have this many pages, we have these flows, we have these things we're noticing, and given your configuration and what's on your page, we'll try to detect whether those things are actually showing up in your data. So for example, in this case, there's an incomplete AdWords linking, or there's some missing campaign parameters, because we're noticing that you have some AdWords campaign work set up. And so we build certain set of expectations to check against those, and they're not there, so we give you the alert.
Right.
Now this is great, and it's a lot of help, but it's not the full picture. So we talked to a lot of you, and we found that there's a few things that you want we just don't have to make sure you have high data quality. One of those things is that diagnostics is great, and it catches stuff after you have data in GA, and sometimes even your own diagnostic work, like you will do by looking at your data. You catch things before they're in. You catch things after you already have bad data. So you may catch things a month later, 2 months later, 3 weeks later. And for all this time, you have like, oh, I can't trust any of that. So you really want to catch issues early before you have a lot of bad data in Google Analytics. Right?
Totally.
The next thing is you want to check to see if a specific implementation change is working. So for example, let's say you launched a new checkout flow. Or let's say you made a change in Google Analytics. Like you added some filters to some goals, and you want to check right there and then, did I do this right? Did I configure this right? Did I do the right way? And there hasn't really been a good way to do that besides real time or these other things. So you may also want to check a portion of your site before it's released to the public, like you want to do it in some development mode and things like that. And you may also need to check things that are secured, like things that are behind a login window. Now, anything behind a login window or a checkout flow are not things that automatic crawlers from anyone can really solve, because they have to get past that login flow.
Right.
So there's no automatic crawler that will solve that. So we thought about this and said, how could we help you with this problem? And that's where we came up with this concept called Google Tag Assistant Recordings. And this tool that I'm about to show you in demo lets you instantly validate your Google Analytics implementation. So you can instantly check things, you can diagnose what's wrong, you can fix them, and you can see the updates in real time. So you can do what would have taken weeks in the past or days and do it in a matter of minutes. Like this is about saving you tons and tons and tons of time if you implement Google Analytics. So those of you that actually do this frequently should pay special attention, because this is something that I expect is going to make your job a lot easier than it was before.
I love the in minutes part.
Yes.
So back in my practitioner days, I would literally go through different paths on my website, send a bunch of hits to GA and wait 24 hours to make sure that I could actually see that data the next day. And, you know, if something went wrong, it's a whole nother waiting and testing period before you can continue down that launch path. So.
Absolutely. And it is definitely something very painful for users. And it's something we want to put a lot of attention to now. So let me show you a quick demo of how this works. So I'm going to switch over to my screen here and show you like what I've got.
Awesome.
So on, I'm looking at a website which we've looking at the Google search results here for something called the Google Gopher sticker, and this all will lead to our internal store. This store that I've set up. I want to check to see if this flow. I'm going to do a checkout flow. I'm going to check to see if this entire checkout flow from the start of the search page to the checkout flow is actually working appropriately. Now I've got a Google Analytics property setup and a view setup for this data. And here's my property settings. Here's view settings. These are all the things that are all set up for that account. Now, instead of doing real time, I'll do something better. Now, let's go back to this page. Now, before I can do any of this, you have to install the Google Tag Assistant Recordings Tag Assistant extension. So if I just Google Tag Assistant and you get to the Chrome Web Store, there's this Tag Assistant extension you can add to Chrome. This extension only works in Chrome, so the debugging will work in Chrome. But you can I'll show you how it can work around with other browsers later. So you add this to Chrome, and then you get this handy dandy extension in which shows up on the top right. It's this guy right here. And what the extension does before I do any recordings is for any page you're looking at on the web, it'll tell you whether you have a Google Analytics tag on there, and it'll give you some more information on this as you dig into it. So, and this works for non-Google Analytics tags as well. They have plenty of other tags on there you can start playing with. We're going to focus on the Google Analytics piece today. So I'm actually going to start a recording. I do that by hitting this record button. And recording starts after I hit that button. So let's go back here. Just start it over again. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page. So that's the starting of my recording. So I've hit record, I refresh, OK, I'm here. So from this point on, I want to go ahead and get a Google sticker. Takes me to my page. And you know what? I like this Gopher sticker. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that page. This looks good. Let's add this to my cart. Cool. Let's view the cart. Yep. Let's buy this with Google Wallet here. And I'll place the order. Takes me to the Google Wallet checkout page. Sure, continue. And I've placed the order. So cool. Now my order's placed. I'm going to hit stop recordings. It tells me that there are 8 pages tracked and 7 tags fired. So let's look at this report. What happens when you see this? So you hit that show full report button, and now we give you another browser tab, which has a really nice summary of things that happen. Now there's 2 tabs here: the Tag Assistant report and the Google Analytics report. The Tag Assistant report just shows you for each page what would Tag Assistant have said. Like if find the Google Trusted Stores tag on the 2nd page, no tags found on that page, et cetera, et cetera. So it just gives you kind of a high level what tags are found in the information you see in Google Tag Assistant. So there is a lot of information here. The part that I'd have us think about and look at is the Google Analytics report. So when I tab over here, it's going to do something really interesting. It's actually connecting to your Google Analytics login. So if you're not logged in, it'll ask you to log in. It checks to see if you have access to any of the properties tied to that recording you just did. So in this case, I have access to one of them, the one I showed you in admin, and there's one I don't. The one I can't actually see much information for them, only the public stuff. But here, for the one I do, I can go see a lot of configuration information. So I look at this report, and what I'm looking at now is something pretty cool. What we've done is you take that recording, that browser, that series of events, and we send it through an emulation of what Google Analytics would have done with that data. So we're actually processing it through the back end and seeing what it would have done. And it'll tell you what Google Analytics would have done. So you've seen, like, here's the recording summary. We'll summarize a set of alerts. I'll come back to this, of things we caught that might be problems. And we'll even show you a summary, like in the order of the audience acquisition, behavior, and conversions, sort of the same stack, the same curriculum that Google Analytics uses, and show you a summary of what this experience was. So if I start to look at this, and then before that, and after that, sorry, you can see details on each page going into like each individual hit sent on each page and all the details. So let's back up for a second. We've done the recording, and now we're looking at the output of the recording as Google Analytics would have seen it.
So just to recap here, you're saying that this data hasn't actually been processed and sent to GA, but this recording is showing as if it had been?
Actually, so every time, since you have that site tagged with GA, it does get sent to GA.
Okay.
But at the same time, we're doing a second emulation here,
Okay.
so you can see it in this way. So if you make changes here, it doesn't resend it to GA.
Got it.
And you'll see the impact of that. So if I'm looking at the summary, the first thing I see is that, okay, there's a Chrome browser I used. Yep, I'm on Chrome. I'm in English. And I had 2 sessions, which is strange because we only had 1 session. So there's already something that we see that's kind of an issue. We keep going down here, and we look at the acquisition, and we see there are 2 sessions. One came from search, and one came from a referral from pay.kievit.us.
Interesting.
That's interesting. Next, we look at the behavior section. We look at the first page and last page. And something that stands out to me is the site content. Now, for the site content, these are the URIs that are going to show up on your pages report, your all pages report in GA.
Ooh, that's going to create a mess.
Exactly. If this is going to create a big mess. If you notice, there's a bunch of query parameters that are in the URLs. And if you don't fix that, when you go to your all pages report in GA, you're going to see a ton of like garbage pages that have no aggregation. So you won't be able to tell which pages are working well and which pages are not.
So actually, one of the things that you could do from the GA standpoint is you could exclude the URL parameters in your view settings. And that way, when you go to your pages report later on, it'll be clean.
Great. Now, see, this is great because in a minute, we've gone through and identified a couple of problems. Looking at this, and we said, that's something that we could fix. So we've gone from having to do real time and trying to figure out what the problem would be to being told right in front what the problems are.
Right.
So here's what makes this go from like, oh, that's cool, to like, this is going to be a game changer for some people. Let's do what you just suggested. You said we can exclude these URL parameters. Okay, let's go do that in Google Analytics. So here's my property that for this page, this site I've done.
Right.
And we can exclude the URL parameters in view settings. Okay, so cool. I think the URL parameters, I think one of them was JSession ID. So I'm going to do that, JSession ID. I'm going to go here and save. Now, here's the problem before, right? Before you had this little word that says success. All right, cool, success, but did that work? Like, am I using that exclusion the right way?
Right.
Now you wait 24 hours normally, and you go see and wait to see it. This is why it takes so long normally, because you're like, did that work? And you have to double check.
Yep.
Now, we could actually go and just re-record this to see if this worked. Well, we've gone and done something a little bit better and added this update report button. Now, what this does is it takes that same recording that we did, and it reprocesses it with your current settings in GA. So I just made this change in GA. I'm going to hit update on the report, and it's going to reprocess it. It's not going to send the hits again to GA, but it's going to go and re-emulate it. And if you look, those JSession IDs are gone.
Wow. So this is super real time. As soon as you made that change in GA, you can update the report and see that actually had the effect that you were hoping for.
It's instantaneous.
Wow, that's really great for troubleshooting.
Absolutely. So let's go back and fix this again. Now, I forgot a query parameter. Let's go add that one. So there's another one, which is A. So I'm going to go and add A and hit save. And did that work? Let's go check. And it didn't. In fact, it got worse. I introduced a regression. We made a change that actually broke something else. This sometimes happens also, right? You think you fixed something,
right?
But you end up breaking something else,
which you wouldn't have known for 24 hours.
And then it's another 24 hours later before you go fix it. So now we're on the day 3. Let's go back, and I think you may catch what I did wrong here. Any ideas?
Is it supposed to be like comma separated?
Exactly. It's comma separated. So it's comma separated. So if I did this, let's go back here and update again. And bam, fixed, right?
That looks much better.
We've just cut 3 days of debugging down to about 2.5 minutes.
That's awesome.
Right?
Wait, can we fix the other problem with the multiple sessions?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, okay, so first of all, why would this be happening? The first one, session 1, that's actually the page, right?
Yep, that's the search acquisition. And here's how we can dig deeper into that. We can look at the flow, and you can see how there's a session start that happens here.
Okay.
Right? And there's a session start that happens here. So it looks like the first session happens from the search result, which is where we think we should happen. And the second session happens right after we go to the site, this pay.kiva.us site, and it's being treated as a referral.
Oh, interesting. So that shouldn't be happening. So we could probably exclude that referring URL in our settings again.
That's right. Yeah. So like this is a referral exclusion. This happens when people have subdomains or they use checkout flows that are outside of their domain, and that people don't want to see you go to Google Checkout or something else and then come back and seem like a different session. It's all part of the same session.
Yep.
So you add that referral exclusion into your property settings. Let's go here and add a referral exclusion here, and let's fix this typo. It's pay.kiva.us. And now we update the report. And look, one session.
Awesome.
And not only did that fix the session, it fixed all my conversions as well. Like all my conversions now work. So why aren't my goals working? Why aren't my filters working? Why aren't X working? You can now go tell like instantaneously, right, that it's completely free flowing and working. So this is huge. Like we went from weeks to minutes, right? Yep. For some people. I want to point out that we're not completely done yet.
Okay.
Right? Like there's some things that it's catching that we may not have caught as well. So for example, this page did not send a hit. So if I go and hit this alert, it'll actually take me to that part in the flow. So I see that there's a page in the flow we had that wasn't sending a hit.
Okay.
So maybe it's missing the tag.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can do is let's go back to we can go double check this. It looks like the details page. So I go back and double check this. Let's go back here on my browser. And let's go back to the details page. And you can use just a quick glance at Tag Assistant here. No tags found on this page. Mm. So this part of your checkout flow is actually missing a tag. And here's another case where you just wouldn't have found that if you had just been looking at your Google Analytics data overall. Because it's, right. Look, your goals look fine. Your sessions look fine, but you've got a significant part of your flow, checkout flow, that's missing a tag.
Right. Or if you had a checkout flow, like a goal funnel conversion that had a required step for the funnel visualization of this page, you wouldn't have any data.
Exactly. You wouldn't have any data. Your goals would completely not work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another one. Here's another one that's we found for this one. This page was requested with a Google auto tagging gclid parameter, but the redirect corrupts the parameter value. So gclids are the tags sent by AdWords clicks. It's a Google click ID. It's important for the clicks versus conversions or AdWords clicks versus sessions problems that some people have in Google Analytics, where they see lots of AdWords clicks, but they don't see that many sessions in GA from AdWords. And this can happen because your site may mangle something along the way. So let's go tap into this guy. And we see that in here, as I dig deeper into this, let's still dig into this URLs. So when you do this nice formatting, this page gets sent a redirect, and here's the gclid ID. So we're taking all these query parameters and expanding it into this nicely formatted table. And I compared with the URL that's sent to Google Analytics, and I think you can see what's happening with the gclid.
Not really sure.
So here's the gclid,
right,
and here's this gclid. Looks like it's getting the underscore, everything after the underscore is getting dropped.
Cut off, yeah.
So this is never going to work.
Right.
Like if your site does this for all things, it's never going to work. So this is something my web developer probably have to go fix. Now, we've also made it easy to share. Now this is also really cool. So like, suppose these things that we just went and fixed, suppose you didn't know how to fix them, right? Or in this case, like I don't know how to fix this guy. What you can do is I can save this report, and it saves this as this file. I can go email this file to anyone on my team. They can then open that file. So they'll just open a file, and here's that file just downloaded. it opens that file, and they see the same Google Analytics recording that you had. So you guys can be working on a single source of truth. Like, here's this recording we want to make work. I've done a checkout flow. Help, like you can work with somebody else, let's say your partner or your, if you have a Google Analytics implementation specialist that helps you, you can work with them with this file, sending it back and forth, saying, hey, why doesn't this work? And you can be talking about the same thing.
Right.
And both of you can go make changes and update the report to see if it's working now, which is really cool, because then you can say, okay, cool, now it's working. And you both agree. Another usage of this is potentially, let's say you want to build up like a set of tests for your site. Like, when we push, let's say we want to make changes, these are the flows that really should work always. You build up a set of recordings that are like, okay, save this one, and save this one. And each one, every release you have, you can go and open it and test it to see if it's working.
Super smart. So let's say you have a sign-up flow, a checkout flow, and a contact us flow on your website. And these are your 3 most important calls to action and conversions that you look for. So every time your developers push out something new, they have to run through all 3 scenarios, update that report, and see if they've broken anything or if all is looking good.
Yeah.
That's a great way to kind of implement a QA process with your analytics. That's super lightweight for your developers, because all they have to do is update the report and make sure there's nothing broken.
Exactly.
But we'll make sure that, everything goes out as planned and you don't get a lot of those uh-ohs after.
Absolutely. It's hard because you push one change and it affects something else, right? And it's a really easy way to do this. And you can always get into that. So let's get out of this page. So if I go into here and you go to tag extension, your tag assistant extension, you can always hit this view recordings button. Now, if you don't have a recent recording, it will still let you get into the recordings page. And from here, you can open, from the Google Analytics page, you can open a recording. So if you don't actually have anything recorded, it will take you right into the open dialog, which I'll get to in a second. It'll take you right into the open dialog, so it'll just jump right into the thing you need to do. So you can do lots of things. We can print. So if you want to just go over this report and just highlight the things with somebody else, like, can we fix this and fix this? Export that. You can print it. It saves it as a PDF. Formats it nicely, so you can just go look at the entire report. Before you print it, let's say you want to expand all the page loads, the page hits, the event hits, and the other hits. So now, when I print it now, it's now 15 pages worth of data for that recording we just did. So it shows you all of the open event hits. You can see we've got latency tracking. In fact, let's just go over it on the expanded view. So just before we go into details, I'll just pause and recap for 1 second. We did a recording. We immediately saw how Google Analytics would treat that recording. Krista, you saw a couple of things that could be fixed easily.
Right.
We fixed those things, and each time we made a fix, we checked to see if it worked in a matter of seconds. It wasn't like wait till 4 hours or 24 hours or a week to see if the data is actually working now. We fixed 3 things in about 2 minutes, and now we're really confident that this checkout flow is going to behave the way we want it to when somebody else uses it. Say like, you know what, cool, and I feel great about my changes in GA.
Yep. Man, I can't even tell you. Literally, this was my life for years, and it took many, many days to do this whole process. I wish I had had this tool then.
Sure. So you want to go back to real time?
No.
Okay, cool. So maybe I'll just walk you through some more data that's in the flow section. Now, the flow section, what this does, this section captures deep data on all of the pages in your recording. So for example, we can expand all these pages. Like here's the second page, the first page of our site. The redirect, the content of that, the URL, we went over this. We have a lot of information on the time. So you can see that one thing that's interesting about this is that the hit wasn't sent until 8 seconds after the page load.
Oh, wow.
So that's a kind of a big deal.
Right.
Here's another problem, right? If you wait, if your tag is at the bottom of your page instead of the header, and it takes 8 seconds to send the page, send all this stuff to GA, what happens if you get an AdWords click? and then somebody leaves your site in the first 8 seconds, which is
It's not going to
possible.
get attributed.
Exactly, it's not going to get attributed. And you're like, wait a minute, I've got all these AdWords clicks, and where are my AdWords sessions? They're not going to show up because you sent your hit so late. So you absolutely need to send your hit sooner. And here's one way to see it. Like you could send this to a developer and say, hey, we need to move our code up. We need to shrink the time to send the hit over.
Yep. And
there is a balance that people have to play with between like getting the page to load and getting the hit to be sent. But you have to be very careful with any time of acquisition, because if you don't send it fast, your reporting is going to be off. So that's one thing I see already. We can see that there's 5 hits sent on this page. One's a hit for a page view hit. Then we have an event hit, another event hit, another event hit, another event hit. So we can look at the event hits that we're sending, and for each page or event hit, so let's look at the page view hit. You can see that this page starts the campaign. It's the acquisition source. We can check to see if this, everything here looks good. See, it's the first hit in the session. What time it's stored in GAS. So we make sure that's like matches up with our expectations. So again, when we go back to data and expectations, it's very difficult when you look at aggregates to compare your expectation against the aggregates. But what we're doing here is giving you a really drilled down way to look at your expectation of in real time of the thing you just did. So this should match the time we did this. So we did record this at 1:12. That's good. That's cool. That's the page hits. See, the hit was captured without modifications. Now, if I had filters or mutations in my GA, it would have told me what modifications are being made to the page.
Okay.
Here's our event. So the event title, a bunch of latency information on the event. So a ton of information on this event, this hit event, this interest group stickers event. Again, event category interest, event action group stickers, event label, browse, real-time checking of your event configurations, making sure that works. Another one, event max visit value, browse, low value. These capture the way you want. So again, lots and lots of information. You can dig deeper into any of these things to get really detailed information if you want. So what we're really trying to do is just give you as much information that we can give you to dig deeper if you need to. But we first start with, what do we see with a set of alerts? And I think we have on the order of 15, 20 or something like that we catch automatically. And then give you like a good summary for you to compare against your data. Say like, okay, is this how I'd want this to show up in acquisition? Is this how I'd want to show up in audience behavior conversions?
Right.
So
this is great.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm going to use it.
Great. Yeah, the other thing I'd say, like you can, after you're in the data, you can also change views. So many times you have like multiple properties for a single site, or you may have multiple views for a single site. So like one you may have filters on and one you may not have filters on, and you want to compare how that site behaves. You can do that. You can select potentially multiple views at the same time from the same property, or you can just do one view and switch off. So you can diagnose it at the view level. This thing's really nice. So you may want to figure out how this would have, that checkout flow would have behaved from a different country or different location, right? So like I can say, you know what, how would this have worked from Spain? And it takes your recording and it mimics that coming from Spain to see if that would have been captured well from in your GA recording. So if you had anything around, if you have any filters that will apply in certain countries, does that work?
Right.
So it lets you approximate another country as well, another location.
So I noticed one of the options there was to change internally or externally your IP address. I know a lot of companies, like the Google store even, like will have filters on their accounts for employees internally on your own IP versus external. So that's a great way to check. I know a lot of times when I've been troubleshooting internally, if I have filters on my account and I forget that I'm looking at the wrong profile, I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see because I've filtered myself out. So this is a great way to be able to check both easily.
Absolutely. Like there's definitely cases where you're like things behave much differently if you're on your internal network. And you want to be like, like let's take somebody outside of my internal network and I'll use my home IP or use something else. So this is a really great use for that. Open lets you open a file that you've downloaded. And one thing I can go over now is we did all this in Chrome. And you may say, well, how does Firefox perform? Or how does IE perform? Now, while this tool only works in Chrome, we can open recordings that have been recorded in Firefox and Internet Explorer.
Okay.
And because we're using actually a standard format called a HAR file. A HAR file is like an activity report for websites that it's a standard format across browsers. And you can just Google how to do this in Internet Explorer and in Firefox, and there are different ways to capture these HAR files in Firefox and IE. So Internet Explorer, you can use HTTP watch, and Firefox actually it's part of the browser itself.
Mm-hmm.
You can record the HAR file from those browser sessions. Like let's say I want to do a Firefox checkout or an IE checkout. Save those, open them with this tool, and now you can analyze a Firefox recording.
Right.
So just because the tool itself is a Chrome extension doesn't limit you to just debugging Chrome. You can use multiple browsers. So if you have a way to record HAR files in a mobile browser, you can look at mobile sessions as well. That's
great. Cool.
So let's see. Did I cover anything here? I think that covers most of the tool. It's a very powerful tool. I think it's something that for implementation should take a lot of the is this data accurate questions away. So if you go back quickly to the presentation, we had all these questions before, like all these errors, and they're all fixable now with this tool. These things are all, they're done. Like you're good. Like you can check these. You can feel safe. You can feel secure. You don't have to worry about these things anymore because now you can just quickly check to see if these things are working.
Awesome.
And this is more than just at the initial setup of Google Analytics, but like anytime you're making a change implementation, either in your website or the GA implementation itself. Let's say you launch a new landing page like we had at the beginning, or you launch a new website store, or you change something in one of your key flows, you should check. Or you're making a big presentation or trying to make a big decision on advertising buzz, it's worthwhile to make a quick check whether you're basing it on good data.
So that was awesome.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot too. Thank you so much. So we're going to go over into Q&A now. But before we do, as always, a few reminders, our resources. So we have a lot of them. There's the Help Center, support.google.com/analytics. There's also the Analytics Academy for topics like digital analytics fundamentals, e-commerce analytics, mobile analytics, and Google Tag Manager. And then, you guys are all part of the Google Plus community for GA Premium. That's how you're logging into this Hangout on Air. So that's a great place to connect with each other, have conversations, ask questions, and really participate and kind of grow our collective knowledge. And then you can also get us on Twitter at Google Analytics, and I'm at Krista Seiden. So with that, let's go ahead and move over into Q&A. If you guys have any questions, please continue to submit them through the HOA box, and we'll get them answered. All right, so AJ, a few questions for you. Jim wants to know, does the referral exclusion list now support subdomain exclusions?
I think you're asking about the GA referral exclusion list here. So,
Frank, did you have an answer?
Did you want to answer this?
Yeah, sure. So in the referral exclusion list, anything that you enter there is basically used as a right string match on the text that you enter. So it has always worked on subdomains. If you had entered here just keyfeed.us, it actually would also have worked. For this demo, because we wanted to show something interesting, we actually used a subdomain. So the answer is yes, it does support subdomains.
Awesome. Okay, so a question from Shailesh. How can I capture user engagement time on my website?
User engagement time. I think that depends on what your definition of user engagement is. If you're looking for, maybe I'll try to answer it as an example. When I think of Google Analytics itself, we have different definitions for what engaged users are. So there's people that are kind of passively engaged. If you get a report, they leave. and they may look at a report for 2 minutes, scroll around, and that's some level of engagement. Then we have users that are more actively engaged, where they've actually added filters and secondary dimensions and changed state ranges and things like that. And we think of those groups differently. So one thing that we do is we segment our user base, use segments to check to see if, let's look at users that have hit a certain level of engagement criteria, and then measure the page duration time or the session duration for those groups compared to the groups of users that we define as non-engaged or less engaged. That's one way to do it. I think you can do it in many different ways. That's kind of the power in Google Analytics. It's like you can do many different things. That's one that comes to the top of my mind. Frank, or Krista, I don't know if you had another option to answer this.
Sure. Frank, did you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. One thing that you could do is set a timer in your page and send an event after the timer expires. What you also can do is, if a user scrolls beyond a particular point, send an event at that point. It doesn't exactly measure the time, but it does sort of indicate if user is engaged or not.
Yeah, it's some people do because they worry about people leaving the site and not getting another hit. So some people send a hit every 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Now, that's an option, but you have to be careful with that, because you can quickly
hit limits.
You can quickly run into hit limits, and you can just see your data explode.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the structure of your site and your business and what you're trying to do.
Yep. Okay, so Tom has a question. Can you use Google Tag Assistant recordings for automated testing?
Yeah, we currently don't support this yet, although we are thinking about it. Frank, you put some thought into this in terms of how we could potentially support different automated testing methods.
So what we've been thinking is that if you have a sort of automated test, and you have a way to record the interactions between the test and the internet or your test server, you could send this recording to an API that we yet have to build. Together with this API, you would send, I expect to see this many page views and this many events and all that. And then what you would get back from this to be developed API is a summary of your test succeeded or it failed because you expected so many page views, but you only got X. So that would be a way to do automated testing with things like WebDriver and such.
Yeah. Great. So Rajesh wants to know, does the site need to be publicly available to use this, or can I also record a session on a site that lives on my desktop?
You can, as long as you've sending hits. You'd be sending hits to GA. So if it doesn't need to be publicly available, you can run it on a private domain or a local server, as long as it's sending hits over.
Great. So Henry wants to know, does this show which filters are filtering out something?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So in the recording list, when you're looking at the report, it'll show for a page view or something like that. It'll show us if something's being filtered out.
Yeah, it will show filters. I actually didn't have any filters on this property.
Actually, you do. If you go to page load number 5.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Frank. Let's go to page load number 5.
I added a filter just for that.
Ah, sweet.
And
where is it?
Expands a hit. Then in the view section of the hit, you will see that it is filtered out, and it will give you the name of the filter. So there's a filter, in this case, drop card.
Okay, so yes, this hit was dropped by one filter named drop cart. And it's
very convenient if you have dozens of filters.
Yeah, so here's this drop cart, which excludes anything with the cart. So then it tells you that, yes, it works.
Exactly.
There's where to show that it filters out. So the answer is definitely yes, and here you can see it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for adding that, Frank. Cool. So Karen wants to know, does anything get stored in GA when I make a recording?
So when you go through your site, and since you have a GA tag on your site, that won't behave any differently. You'll still send those hits to GA from your one session. But anytime I hit update, or you open this file, or you send it to somebody else and they open, they update, you make changes, we're not resending the hits to GA. We're just emulating again. So it's only sent the one time you actually do the steps on your website. We're not preventing that initial session from going through. We're just using an emulation in addition.
Awesome.
We are not storing anything in GA that you are recording through this. What I mean is, let's say that you're recording a session where you enter a credit card or something. That information is actually stripped out before it is sent to GA, and also it is not stored in GA at all.
Yep.
Cool. So maybe kind of related, Haley wants to know, can I store the recording so that I can play it back later?
Absolutely. Hit the save button and then open it again later.
Sweet. All right.
Anyone can open it later, not just you. So you can send it to somebody else.
Cool. Last question here, unless anybody wants to submit any last minute ones. This comes from David. He wants to know, what is the relationship between tag assistant recordings and diagnostics in the GA front end?
The relationship. Diagnostics, I think of them as automated alerts that crawl and look for issues. They're basically just like these alerts, where they look for things that could be going wrong on your website, and they do it automatically. They're not looking at any particular flow. They're checking for a bunch of conditions, whether your goals configured or whether goals are being dropped off, and it's anything that we can do automatically without knowing inherently a full set of expectations for your site. Tag assistant recordings is more laser focused on a flow you care about, or something in particular you have expectations about. And it's something that we have much less awareness of. For example, here, as you saw, we started with 2 sessions in this recording. Now, Google Analytics doesn't know that you're supposed to only have 1 session from this behavior, because it's not sitting there and watching you side by side record this session, right? So in this case, you actually have more information as a user than we would. So you're a better diagnoser than we are. Diagnostics in the front end is our automated alerts, and this is your advanced troubleshooting tool. And that's how I separate those things. We are thinking about how to connect these two, like give you closer access to this from the Google Analytics front end, potentially through the admin section. But for right now, this is going to sit inside the tag system extension.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I think this was super helpful. And hopefully all of our users find it helpful as well. So with that, tune in a couple weeks for our next session. Bye, guys.
Thanks.